Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to see so many of you and to talk about this very important topic today, PQC migration, and more precisely, why is now, please note the capital letters, the time to move to post-quantum cryptography. Just before we start, I've been asked to give you some information. So first, this webinar is entirely recorded and you'll receive the replay in your mailboxes in a few days. Second, if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to ask them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them at the end. And last but not least, we are together for about 30 minutes. So let's go. So co-hosting today are myself, Charles Papin. I work as a cryptography engineer at Cryptography Security. I have started in the R&D department working specifically on countermeasures to side channel attacks, and I'm now working in the product line direction so that I can turn our technical know-how into industrial products. And let me introduce my co-host today, Dr. Martin Zuber.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. And yeah, so I'm Martin Zuber. I have a PhD in cryptography, and I've been working on innovation, research, and development projects for Cryptography Security.
Great. Thank you, Martin. So just before going deep into our topic today, a few words about the company we are currently working in. So Cryptography Security was founded in 2019 by Dr. Jean-Charles Fauger, who has 20 plus years of academic background in the field of PQC. So we are first and foremost a cryptography company with much effort funneled into research and development. We managed to transform our state-of-the-art technology into viable demonstrators, proofs of concepts, and products to help public and private organizations in their PQC migration journey. On the right-hand side of your screen, you may have a look at partners and clients we are currently working with, mainly in the banking sector, finance services, defense industry, energy or aerospace sectors, among others. I just want also to stress the fact that we are well established in many standardization bodies and actively participate to define the post-quantum standards. All right, so the agenda today, first we'll talk about the quantum threat and be a bit specific about the science behind it. Second, we'll move to the industrial implications of PQC migration. Then we'll dig into the core topics of today's seminar, the 5 reasons why now is the time to launch your PQC migration. And then we'll wrap it up and leave some time for Q&As. So first, the quantum threat. I'm leaving the floor to Martin.
Thank you, Charles. Yes, and to understand what we mean by the quantum threat, let's just wind back the clock a little bit, back to the 1970s. Until then, the confidentiality of communications was solely based on the principles of symmetric cryptography with a pre-shared key. So back then, if Alice and Bob wished to communicate securely, they had to meet physically in the same place and exchange a key used both for the encryption and decryption of their messages. And once in possession of this pre-shared key, they were able to exchange encrypted messages securely from a distance. Now, the arrival of large public communication networks, such as the internet, renders the use of pre-shared keys highly impractical. And this is when a new cryptographic paradigm emerges, which is called asymmetric cryptography or public key cryptography. In this paradigm, there is no need for a prior meeting and a pre-shared key. With asymmetric cryptography, I can generate a key pair, and one key is publicly distributed on the internet without restriction and allows my friend to encrypt his messages to me. The other key is private and allows me and me alone to decrypt messages encrypted with the corresponding public key. This cryptography relies for its security on mathematical problems deemed difficult, and that's to say difficult to solve by a computer in terms of the number of operations or the amount of memory required. One of these problems, the discrete logarithm problem, has been particularly popular with the academic community and serves as the foundation for 2 widely used cryptographic systems. One is based on the factorization of prime numbers, and that's RSA, and the other on the group law of analytic curves, and that's ECC. Given the amount of research effort spent on these algorithms, they're today formidably optimized, very light from a network traffic point of view, and very well known. But, well, there's a but. And this but is this big golden machine, the quantum computer. It uses the physical properties of elementary particles of matter to calculate differently than a classical computer using qubits, that's quantum bits by analogy with classical bits. And I insist here on the wording of calculate differently and not calculate faster or calculate more efficiently, for instance. Indeed, a quantum computer is not a bigger steroid-infused classical computer with more power. There will always be the need for classical computers for certain tasks that they solve very efficiently. But the quantum computer has the capacity to accelerate the resolution of certain problems, including, unfortunately, the discrete logarithm problem. And let's be clear, when I say accelerate the resolution of the DLP, I'm talking about going from an unimaginably long duration today to a few minutes tomorrow to breaking a key. In other words, with the quantum computer, the RSA and ECC crypto systems do not just lose some security, their security evaporates. That's a complete change. That change of mathematical underpinning is necessary. And this is where post-quantum cryptography, or PQC, comes in. Now, post-quantum cryptography is an umbrella term, and it encompasses a host of efforts aimed at finding and implementing new public key crypto systems. Those efforts include theoretical research, standardization, deployment, and these new crypto systems are developed for secure communication between traditional computers while being resistant to attacks from quantum computers. A first look at this problem might yield a very simple solution: just replace RSA with a similar but quantum-resistant algorithm and just be done with it, right? Unsurprisingly, it's not that simple, for two main reasons. First, because the catastrophic collapse of the security of RSA and ECC could happen tomorrow to any crypto system. Just as there's no absolute proof of security for RSA and ECC, there will never be an absolute proof of security for their successors. Common sense therefore compels the development of more than one successor to ECC and RSA, all based on different mathematical problems. Should one fail in the future, the security of a PQC infrastructure would not be compromised. A second reason is the fact that a single PQC algorithm cannot, like RSA does, be used for both encryption and digital signatures. Where in the traditional setting, RSA offered a relatively unified solution to meet all needs, in the PQC paradigm, each use needs to have its dedicated algorithm. And the conjunction of these two realities, multiplicity of risks on one side and multiplicity of use cases on the other, means that the study and standardization of a large number of algorithms based on a variety of mathematical problems is necessary. And this, of course, will have consequences for the management of cryptography in your organizations. Now, one more thing about standards. PQC has long been a research subject confined to labs and scientific conferences, and in 2016, the National Institute of Standardization and Technology, the NIST, announced the start of a competition for the future of PQC algorithm standards. Well, the future is now. In August of this year, the first standards to come out of this competition have been published. They're paving the way for the industrialization of solutions based on this technology. And notice this has been a long process. Developing a novel cryptographic algorithm and evaluating its weaknesses requires years of research before a reasonable level of confidence in its security can be reached. This does not mean absolute confidence has been reached. Research is ongoing on the security of standardized algorithms, and in parallel, the NIST competition plows forward with the standardization of new algorithms based on different mathematical problems. As of today, the mathematical problems favored by NIST are Euclidean lattices and hash functions. Last point, a common recommendation is to use a hybrid approach when transitioning to post-quantum cryptography. And this means combining traditional cryptography like RSA and ECC with the new post-quantum algorithms. This strategy offers the best protection against both current threats and potential future attacks on the new standards.
All right, thanks a lot, Martin, for this scientific insights. I hope you've understood why this threat is important and will impact the whole world of cryptography. So now just a word of introduction before we go into details regarding industrial consequences. As you will have gathered, the advent of of a quantum computer, is not just a subject for the small world of academic research. The impacts of both on both public and private organizations will be numerous and will require major efforts. These impacts are not the core subject of this webinar, but they will be covered in depth in future presentation. So we've decided to give you a quick overview of 3 areas where post-quantum migration will affect your organizations and businesses. The first impact of implementing PQC in an infrastructure is the one induced by changes in the sizes and formats of the cryptography objects used. As you can see from the table on the screen, the sizes of keys and signatures change significantly, as do the size and formats of the certificates linked to your PKI, from a few dozen bytes to several kilobytes, a difference of 2 to 3 orders of magnitude. This difference has consequences at several levels. In embedded systems, for example, where memory space is constrained and cannot always manage such objects. From a network point of view too, where what used to typically travel as a unique frame will have to be fragmented and will weigh even more on the traffic management, resulting in additional latency. And at the application level too, with key negotiation performance on TLS and IKE, for instance, that will need to be reassessed. However, contrary to popular belief, PQC algorithms do not necessarily lead to a loss of performance in terms of key generation or signature speed. MLDSA, for instance, is faster than RSA for generating a key pair or signature. The second impact is the need to establish an exhaustive inventory of your cryptographic assets. And when we listen to the feedbacks we can glean from our partners and customers, we find that this inventory is rarely up to date or even simply non-existent. And with a good reason. Until now, this has been a non-issue. Today, however, a prerequisite for successful migration to post-quantum technologies is to know precisely the state of cryptography in your infrastructure, so as to be able to prioritize risks and treat the most sensitive applications first. This is going to be a very complicated task. Firstly, because cryptography is everywhere, in all your applications, in all your equipments. And until now, no centralized cryptography management or configuration system has been put in place. Worse still, some cryptographic implementations are hard-coded in the applications themselves, which means that instances of such applications have to be modified one by one. Secondly, because no single tool will enable you to carry out this inventory. You'll need to work with network analyzers to monitor flows and key negotiations, with binaries analyzers, source code analyzers, certificate analyzers, etc. In short, a long and painstaking job ahead. The third impact we'll present you today is related to the management of cryptography in your systems as a whole. If you're going to painfully migrate your cryptographic assets from A to Z today, you might as well take this opportunity to overhaul, to recast your organization so as not to find yourself in the same situation in the future. The keyword related to this new crypto management best practice recommended by most agencies is crypto agility. The concept of crypto agility covers both the method of cryptography centralized management as such and the design of the underlying solutions, applications, crypto providers, etc. that make this centralized management possible. Having a crypto agile organization means being able to configure all those cryptographic assets centrally without having to intervene directly on each application, on each software layer, each library, each piece of equipment, etc. Once again, this is a major undertaking. So we've seen that the advent of the quantum computer and the ensuing post-quantum technologies will have a major impact on your infrastructure and organizations. But we also know that CIOs and CISOs always have a pile of urgent matters to deal with, and that maybe the post-quantum migration issue can wait in the face of other legitimate concerns. The purpose of this section is to dispel this belief and encourage you to tackle this issue right away. The most widely publicized threat posed by the advent of quantum computer is the harvest node decrypt later threat. It consists of accumulating in large-scale data centers immense quantities of data encrypted using traditional cryptography in the hope of being able to decrypt them when a quantum computer worthy of the name becomes available. This attack rightly alarms national authorities who are concerned about the storage and decryption capacities available to certain strategic competitors, and which could threaten the confidentiality of data whose secrecy must be guaranteed over long periods of time. But these concerns are not confined to the struggle between states. Let's take the example of a VPN encrypted communication between an executive and his legal department, for instance, which mentions confidential elements of a particular contract. If this conversation were to be intercepted and stored, the confidentiality of such a contract could be compromised by a malicious actor in 1, 5, 10, or 15 years' time, simply because they have quantum decryption capabilities and a copy of the encrypted message on their hard drives. From an industrial point of view, it's necessary to think about the entire project lifecycle, including design, prototyping, launch, support, and end-of-life phases. These cycles are long, and once embedded in a product, cryptography can only be modified with much difficulty. Consequently, given the deadlines that lie ahead in terms of regulation, as we'll see in the next slides, or the advent of a quantum computer capable of breaking RSA, and given the length of time during which embedded products will be in the wild, it is essential to design solutions today that incorporate post-quantum technologies. Otherwise, the risk you'll face in the near future, will be 1, security flaws vis-à-vis quantum attacks, and second, loss of security certifications for your products. And repatriating all deployed products to modify their cryptography implementations is clearly not a viable solution. In terms of regulation, needless to say that the American authorities are undeniably the driving force. By law, they have just required federal administrations to draw up post-quantum transition roadmaps for the strategic assets. What's more, NIST has set 2035 as the deadline by which federal agencies will not be able to use traditional cryptography any longer, RSA or ECC. In other words, 2035 marks the end of sales of products incorporating traditional cryptography to the American public sector. 2035 means the end of FIPS security certification for traditional cryptography, and 2035 is tomorrow. European security agencies, meanwhile, are more reluctant to impose a black and white date, arguing that they wish to co-construct a roadmap with the industry without imposing a top-down order. However, there has been a number of recent developments that point to a growing awareness and pressure. The French National Cybersecurity Agency, ANSSI, for instance, is working hard to issue security advisors for post-quantum technologies by early 2025. And second, the German BSI has announced it would ban RSA certificates from the government PKI as early as 2035. And once the 2035 deadline has been set, it's time to do some retro planning to find out when the transition should start. And when we do this, well, we realize that we are already behind schedule. Because in cryptography, migrations take time, a long time. We can rely on previous experience, that of the depreciation of SHA-1 hash functions, for instance, which was under attack as early as 2006 and only banned by NIST in 2011. Yet, 6 years later, more than a third of websites were still using this function with no guarantee of security, and not to mention MD5, for instance. Similarly, when elliptic curves cryptography began to be industrialized in the early 2000s, all the experts agreed that RSA was obsolete and that elliptic curves would replace RSA without sharing. Reality proved that RSA remained preeminent, not because of performance issues, quite the opposite in fact, but because of a sort of an incumbency premium, and also because the cost in human and financial resources involved in making this transition was too high. In short, the choice was between a new high-performance solution, ECC, and an older, less efficient solution already in production, RSA, and many preferred the comfort of maintaining RSA to the efficiency of ECC. Today, of course, the question is posed in different terms. It's no longer a question of choosing between a secure crypto system and another secure, more efficient crypto system. It's a question of migrating from a crypto system with no guarantee of security whatsoever and a secure crypto system. No choice. And this migration is going to take time, loads of time, to evangelize your organization decision makers about this issue and its unprecedented scope and complexity, to obtain budgets to invest in tools that will support you in this transition, and then for the migration itself, according to initial feedbacks from some of our customers, the inventory phase alone can take 2 to 3 years. And finally, while there are obviously public initiatives stemming from legislators or administrative authorities to accelerate the transition to post-quantum technologies, it's important to understand that the major tech players aren't waiting for regulation to get them up to speed. Today, most browsers already allow post-quantum key association with MLChem. And similarly, when you negotiate a cipher-suite during a TLS handshake with the Google or Cloudflare server, these servers also offer you to use PQC to negotiate keys. In this way, technology leaders are themselves creating de facto standards, meaning implementing technical solutions that will become the norm due to the strength of their traction on the market. Okay, so we've seen 5 reasons why we should launch now our migration. And well, maybe it's time for a little wrap up and maybe tell you the vision we have here at CryptoNext Security regarding this PQC migration. So in conclusion, as you can see, post-quantum migration is going to be a long-term project for your organizations, requiring education, funding, follow-up, a great deal of organization, the creation of an industrial ecosystem of partners and vendors, etc. At CryptoNext Security, our job is to make your life easier by organizing and sequencing the migration process, planning the efforts required, and developing industrial solutions to meet every need identified. This is our holistic vision of post-quantum migration, an upstream phase of assessment, proofs of concept, and support to prepare your organizations for post-quantum solutions. Once the results of this phase are conclusive, well, it will provide the impetus for the production phase, represented as a virtuous circle here, and consisting of discovery, remediation, and management phases, which are self-perpetuating. And now it's time for maybe some Q&As.
And yeah, and thanks, Charles. And as you were talking, somebody did ask about QKD, which we did mention on one slide, I think, along with PQC. And the question is about how QKD relates to PQC specifically. And so QKD stands for quantum key distribution, and it uses the properties of quantum mechanics in order to transfer a key from Alice to Bob, and it also provides post-quantum security in the sense that the exchange is secure against quantum computers. It's a very different process than PQC, and there's a lot to say about it. So we're not going to get into everything. The point is that it's a very interesting solution, very worthy of further research. For now, however, the European security agencies are, to say the least, skeptical about QKD. They do not recommend its use, or if they do recommend its use, they recommend that it should be used in a hybrid manner with PQC. The American security agencies even hold a bit of a harsher view on that front. QKD is, I think, in a state of research that is not as highly advanced as PQC, and this also reflects in the standardization work that's being done around QKD. Right, so I mean, there could be a whole webinar about that as well. It's a very interesting subject, but I think we don't want to get into too much of the details here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Martin. So there's a second question regarding AES and symmetric cryptography. Martin, could you please tell us to what extent the quantum computer might threaten symmetric cryptography? Yeah,
right. So in very, very short, very few words, the catastrophic collapse of security for RSA and ECC that I talked about in the slides that I presented thankfully does not happen with AES, so we can keep using AES. Symmetric cryptography is not completely untouched by the advent of quantum computers, but very simply put, increasing the size of the keys will suffice in order to ensure that the proper level of security is met. So there's no real threat on that front.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. So we are arriving to the end of this session. Please feel free to contact us on our email. We are more than your questions are more than welcome. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yes,
Have a good
thank you.
day. Bye bye.